Hey, what's up, house groups? Welcome back. We are kicking off 2020 with this new series, How to Begin a Decade. That's just built off these 4 questions I've learned to ask myself that I call my dashboard. Just like the 4 dashboard questions of my life that serve as my warning lights that help me kind of align my heart and aim my life in the direction God has for me to go. And the first one that I shared with you guys on Sunday is, what is my posture? Just trying to ask myself that in all of my roles and all of my relationships constantly. What is the posture that I'm taking? Is it a posture of humility or a posture of pride? Because it's really, really easy to take a posture of pride. There's a story about Winston Churchill. Once he gave a public speech and just tons of people showed up, and someone asked him afterwards, "Are you ever proud of how many people come to hear you speak?" And Churchill chuckled and replied, "Every time I'm tempted to be impressed with myself at the number of people who come to listen to me speak, I remember that if I were being hanged, the crowd would be twice as big." And it's a good reminder from Churchill that pride is really seductive. It's easy to find, it's easy to seek, to just move into this mindset in all of our relationships and in everything we do, where we're seeking to use other people and use our roles and use the opportunities ahead of us to build ourselves up, to just puff up our own self-worth and our own pride, to take rather than to give, and to be selfish rather than selfless, and to think about our ego rather than other people's benefit and God's glory. And it's an easy thing to do. So many of us do it. We live in a world that tells us that's the way to the top. That's the way to get what we want. I mean, you have to scroll social media for what, like 11 seconds before you see somebody posturing and somebody trying to puff themselves up and somebody humble bragging and stuff like that. And I look at my own life and I'm frustrated with how often I feel like my answer to that dashboard question, what is my posture, is pride. It's a posture of arrogance and selfishness and getting rather than giving. And I look at where that gets me. Like long term. In the short term, it feels like, oh, this would be a good idea. And I feel like a saber-toothed tiger in a tar pit. Like the more that I struggle and the more that I claw to get to the top and to get honor and glory and recognition and applause and whatever else for me, the more stuck I become in a pattern that doesn't look a lot like Jesus, because Jesus lived the exact opposite way. I mean, the Bible tells us that we're created by a God who is humble for humility. We're built to leverage our lives for the sake of the people around us, and that's exactly what Jesus did. His humility changed the world. And our humility can do the same thing. I think it's interesting because humility gives us access. Like when we leverage what we have and we leverage our abilities and our positions and our relationships to build others up, we have the opportunity to speak into their lives and to change the world. Humility grants access. It's interesting, in Japan, or in ancient Japan, the houses of the shoguns were built with really interesting doors. A shogun would have a door that started about 2 feet above the ground. It was only about 3 feet tall. So you had to duck and go in head first to get in, which basically in ancient Japan meant that you had to offer your neck, your head, to the sword of the powerful ruler you were trying to visit in order to gain access to his presence. Like submission came before admission. And I think that's such a powerful metaphor for what humility does in our world. If we're willing to bow down, if we're willing to go low, we're able to build other people up in a way that points them toward Jesus and changes their lives and writes a better story for our world. Look, that's the posture that Jesus lived with. This posture of service and humility. I said it on Sunday and I'll say it again. So many of us are okay with humility as long as it's like a pathway to greatness. We're okay with going down as long as it eventually leads us to the top. But Jesus says that humility is the destination, not the journey, and that serving others is greatness. And I think for all of us, we got to be careful about how closely we follow Jesus, because if we're actually aiming our lives in His direction, if we're being honest with ourselves about that question, what is my posture? And we're aiming for a posture that looks like Jesus, we're going to end up in a place of humility. We're going to end up in a place of self-sacrifice, and we're going to end up in a place of service. And that may not be the glory and the greatness that our world recognizes, but it is a glory and a greatness that looks like our God and that changes the world.